Good morning, everyone. It's good to see everyone. Sounds like I missed a good time at VBS. So I had the opportunity to preach at, I don't know if you guys know, but Tierney and I and our kids, we kind of split our time between here and our other church in Tunkhannock. So that's why you guys only see us sometimes infrequently. But I had been asked by Mike from Grace Fellowship in Tunkhannock to preach a couple months ago. And after I did, I told Chuck that I would love to share the same message with you guys. I just felt it was really impactful to me, and I think it's really pertinent to just us as Christians. So the passage, as you guys know, one of my prerequisites for preaching is I don't get to pick the passage. Someone has to pick it for me. So Mike picked for me 2 Corinthians 4:16 through 18. And we'd start by reading it. It says, "Therefore we do not lose heart, though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." So I want to preface this a little bit by some of the content of this, or what I'm going to talk about, is a little bit unseen. So you have to really kind of follow along and kind of follow the thought. It's not super complex, but I just want to kind of preface that kind of all builds on itself. So I don't think that as we walk through life, a single person doesn't at one point in time have some questions, right? Questions are what we use to help us explore and define what is around us. These questions start off pretty simple. Questions like, "Why, Daddy?" Or, "What is that?" A toddler, when learning to talk, does nothing but question and seek to explore what life is all about. Every new experience is filled with awe and excitement and information. The answers to these questions are what help us form our perspective of the world around us. And though that perspective goes on to shape our experiences as we grow into adults. Things like the stove is hot, so we know not to touch it, right? The tree is tall, so we know not to climb too high. My house is a safe place of warmth and comfort, and that's where I get fed. The relationships around me provide security and love. Or maybe these aren't your experiences. Yours could be very different. Maybe your experiences of life are not filled with pleasantries like others. Either way, the answers we glean from our experience help us to interpret and define the world around us. They help us establish our view of the world. And there are many physical experiences that reinforce these truths. If you touch the stove, you get burned. If you climb the tall tree too high, you get scared. You get the point. Then there is this point in time, and it happens continuously throughout life, where your grasp, there's a point in time where your grasp on the world feels relatively solid. You kind of think like, okay, I have all these basic elements kind of figured out. It doesn't mean that you have everything figured out or you have all the answers, but the fundamental understanding of how things work and the purpose of them is relatively fixed. Then something happens. We experience something that catches us off guard. We experience something that doesn't seem to fit inside the context of the reality that has been formed since our childhood. Some unknown, invisible force collides with the reality you have experienced to this point. Some might call it chance, or circumstance, or fate, or luck. You could classify it as good or bad. Or it could be good or bad. Either way, it was unexpected. Maybe up to a certain point, you have not experienced love. And then you meet someone, and for no reason, you can understand they show you love to you. Now love has entered as a new part of your reality. Maybe your life has been relatively easy, and then someone you love dies, and it becomes very hard. And you cannot comprehend how could it be. Everything seems to be crumbling around you. The thing that is crumbling is not your actual world, but your perception of the world. The preconceived notions about life you have built around you to that point have shifted. The person who has been ever existent as a part of your life is now no longer there as a part of your daily interactions. By the word reality, I mean the general experiences of life that are grounded in the truths that we experience. The broad and generalized human experience. It includes things as simple as the sky is blue, the grass is green, which are easy to understand and see. It also includes things that are very complex, such as the workings of human nature, biology, the laws of creation known as science. Our reality is formed by all of this information, and there is such a vast amount of information contained in the human experience that it overflows our capacity as individuals. And so when things like those unexpected experiences happen, our reality expands to include these new truths. New truths. Our capacity expands, not the existence of that truth. It's not that the truth wasn't always true or always present, but it was revealed to you, and once you encounter it, you can't unsee it. You can't go back. I'll give you an example. Has anyone ever shopped for a new car? When you go to do that, right? You pick certain qualities of a car that you want, maybe a color, a make, a model, and then you start looking for it, right? And shopping around. Let's say the car you land on is a 1995 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme. I picked that car because Mike used to drive one of those cars, and it was just a very odd car, and I knew he would like that. So it's a very random car, right? Most people don't have that car anymore. Now, it's pretty random, right? One, you probably agree you don't see anymore. If anyone drives that car here, I'm sorry. It's okay. It's not a bad car. You might not know anyone who owns one, but I can guarantee you, if you are made aware of it and you start looking for one, you will see them everywhere. Has this ever happened to anyone? You will notice every Cutlass Supreme you drive past. Now, we know that someone didn't just randomly sell a whole secret lot of cars to people in your town. What changed was your perception and perspective of your reality. Your capacity increased to include that car. So where am I going with this? Why is understanding this important in light of the verses we are focusing on today? You see, your perception of the world around you is a powerful thing. It impacts most aspects of who you are as a person because our perception of the world guides our behavior in it. When you believe something to be true, it changes how you act and how you live. Some of the information that shapes your perception may have the tiniest sliver of significance, but it's still a part of the whole. Other aspects of your perception hold a lot of weight and have more daily impact. All in all, your perception is created by the input of information that your body receives. Right? We gather things, like you said, seeing something or feeling something. Either intentionally, you input this information through teaching or instruction, or it's unintentional by observation or experience. You see, most of the things we learn as children or young adults, or even adults, are in preparation for the present life here on this earth. How to obey, respect others, build relationships, develop skills, foster independence and self-reliance, and grow to become a respectable man or woman in society. These are all efforts to shape a child's mind to see how the world actually is and to learn how to operate in it. To become a crafty consumer of the earthly life. It's how God designed that we grow and raise our children. And so it's not wrong to have a focus on the elements that dictate our physical reality, so the here and now. The Bible is filled with direction and calls that pertain to life here and now. To teach, to raise, to act. If we look at passages like in Romans 12, you see direction is given to us to rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn, live in harmony, don't be proud, don't repay evil with evil. These are elements of a biblical earthly life. And if God orchestrated that you were given the gift of salvation, these should be elements of your life. All these things are good and necessary, especially to the Christian. But there is a huge and glaring caveat that I'm intentionally working around. What is the caveat? What is the elephant in the room when considering these truths? It is that what we see, touch, hear, feel, smell, taste, and in general experience is a very small portion of the actual reality that we live in. There is a portion of our reality that we are mostly blind to. There is a much larger picture we are living in that is mostly outside of our earthly experience. The spiritual and heavenly realm is invisible to us, but it is as real and as solid as the ground we walk on. We cannot see it, but it is happening all around us. If you've ever had the opportunity to preach, you're very aware of this, because the second you make the commitment to preach, that world is opened up to you in a new way. As a Christian, also, our eyes are open to this reality. But I think we often struggle to know what to do with that information. Maybe you don't feel like it has a lot of significance to our lives now, and maybe it's meant to be kind of saved and experienced later. Maybe you're struggling with even seeing it or believing that something like that could be true. How absurd is it to believe in something you can't see? Why would you believe in this invisible, parallel, spiritual universe? Angels and demons, an overriding, all-powerful God living in a majestic heavenly realm outside of all time and space, but somehow still interacting and engaging with the physical world. How could that be true? Sounds like a movie. How could anyone believe such a thing? Well, we do this kind of stuff all the time. We accept that all we experience is not all that exists each and every day in our lives now. If we look at all that is known, all the information that the internet contains, that books contain, and we measure it against our direct physical and earthly experience of life, it's very small in comparison, is it not? We know this to be true because we have physical limitations that restrict our ability to encounter even all of our own physical reality. What do I mean by that? Well, we accept that we cannot be all places at once, experiencing all experiences that humans experience. Does that mean that they don't happen outside of you experiencing them? I didn't go to VBS. Did it mean it didn't happen? Right? Like the age-old question, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? Most of us believe that it does. We are not only limited by our ability to occupy a certain space, but we are also limited by time. We have only so much of it and only so much energy to be able to fill it. Even the keenest of senses have a very limited reach. Our eyes can only see light in a certain spectrum, and can only appreciate objects of a certain size. Does that mean we don't believe in ultraviolet light or bacteria? Well, you'll believe in it when you get a sunburn or food poisoning. Despite our limitations, we accept that there is a reality outside of our capacity or immediate environment. We accept things that exist we have not seen with our own eyes, things we cannot comprehend with our own minds. We believe there are foods that exist that we have not tasted. We believe that there are places existing we have never traveled to. Do we not? I have never been to heaven or Mars or even Niagara Falls. Does that mean that they aren't real? No, it doesn't. We know there is more out there than we have the capacity for. Our limitations don't dictate the boundaries of what is. We know and accept that we don't know all or experience all things. We know that there is more. Why do we accept that? Maybe because someone else has told us about it. Maybe there is evidence that points to its existence, or that proves a certain reality. What I want us to see is that this passage we are looking at today calls us to perform a mental routine that we already perform every single day in many other ways. But here, God is calling us to focus that routine in a specific direction for an intentional purpose. This mental exercise has purpose and intentionality in our daily walk as Christians. So, in light of this, let's look at today's passage from 2 Corinthians and see what God intends us to see. Paul is the author of the letters to the Corinthian church, and I know we haven't been reading and studying through them. So let's give these passages a little bit of context so we can see what our verses are focusing us towards. We see that verse 16 starts by saying, therefore, meaning that the message about to be spoken is in reference to what was said immediately before this. There is this cascade of ideas that are all linked together. I think it's easy to forget or overlook that many of the books of the Bible are letters from one person to another or a group of people. We tend to break them up and dissect them because we know they are divinely inspired and we want to extract every ounce of meaning from them. But they were intended to be read as a whole. Paul is talking to the Corinthians and basically sharing what has been happening in his life as a believer in his travels. And he is illuminating some issues he has observed in them and also giving them some encouragement. Remember, this is the early church. And all they knew was that Jesus died and was raised. They knew the gospel. They didn't have the whole Bible. God used them and Paul to illustrate to us how we are to live in light of that gospel. He gave us them as an example. And he directs us through their example. Paul saw their lives and using wisdom and direction from God made observations that were intended to impact them and every Christian thereafter, including us today. In chapter 3, Paul is talking to the Corinthians and he's basically bragging about the splendor of the glory of the new covenant. Remember, this is like a new thing, the gospel happening, Jesus raising from the dead. They were Jews coming from this very strict religious background. And they're so excited about basically all the new updates of the covenant and how it works. And he's just saying how much more glorious it is. As believers in Jesus, now we are carriers of that new covenant and this new promise as it relates man to God. Because now it changed that, right? Because before they had to go through the priest, they had to offer sacrifices. There was this very arduous thing. And now man has direct access to God through Jesus. And it's just it's amazing. They're just reveling in that. Paul's saying that Christians in the new covenant are carriers of this gospel. And that being a carrier, we contain this aroma. And this aroma to people who are perishing smells of death. It smells of life to those that are saved by it. This is the mark of a Christian. We are so privileged to be included in this promise, and in that, we become image bearers of that promise and glory. And in the process of our whole life, we are being ever transformed into a clearer depiction of what that glory is. That glory that comes from God. So in a nutshell, this is a summary of the daily walk or life of a Christian. In our most fundamental but also most elevated function, which is to be a display of God's glory. That's our most fundamental but also elevated function. It is our ministry. By that I mean it is our purpose, our direction, or our call. Our purpose as Christians is to display the glory of God to all those around us through the gospel of Jesus Christ. That happens through the gospel's transformative work in our own lives, which causes direct declaration of the gospel through the Word of God. And Paul tells us we don't have to alter it in any way. It has its intended power and purpose designed in it, the way that it is. We don't have to sugarcoat it. It is designed to elevate God and the message about Him, not the messenger. Paul uses an illustration that the glory of God portrayed through the gospel, housed in the heart of a believer, is like a treasure in a jar of clay. He is using this direct comparison to further illustrate that in our purpose we are filled with inadequacy and frailty, especially when measured against God's infinite power and capability. A jar of clay is so inadequate to defend the treasure and so unworthy to house it. As a jar of clay, we have no reason to boast about ourselves. The treasure of God housed in us was not from us, nor was it received by our own efforts. Every ounce of saving power that comes through the gospel is from God. Our frail, clay-like human covering, when compared to the strength and power of God, is laughable. Being a vessel of the gospel comes with a life of refinement. I don't mean refinement as in the finer things in life or prosperity, but refinement as transformative or purifying. The process of that is difficult and full of hardship, but it is necessary and intentional. Paul speaks directly to this process in his own life and the persecution he endured as a Christian. His ability to endure these hardships is directly due to the power of God, not his own capacity. He uses the illustration of a clay jar intentionally because it is brittle and frail, but somehow it doesn't break. He says that we are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. He wasn't able to survive the persecution and trials of life because of his own power, but because of God's. We share this fate with Paul. As Christians, we will experience hardships and persecution and difficulty. Can anyone relate to that? Those things serve two functions. The first of hardship is for us. It's to conform us into the image of God. It is used to refine and purify our character to be more like Jesus. The first function serves the second. Hardships or trials that have that inward effect, that hone our hearts and souls, is intended to be directed. Is directed to us as the first function serves the second. What I'm saying is that the transformative work of the gospel is intended to change us as people. And that happens through hardships. That, in turn, that change in that character has this reflective power that goes out, and it is a witness and a testimony to the people around us. And so that's where it's twofold. So it impacts us as individuals, and then it impacts our world around us. Suffering is meant to change us as individuals, and then that change is in us should go forth and make an impact on the world around us. This is how Paul verbalizes this thought. In verses 10 and 12, he says that we carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. For we who are alive are always being given over to death. That's those trials and suffering and hardship. So that in this life, that his life may be revealed in our mortal body. So then, death is at work in us. That's why he says in us. But life is at work in you, because it's going out to them. So we as Christians, human beings alive in the body, are being given over to death, which is another way of saying experiencing physical trials on this earth as refinement of our image. That image reflects the life of Jesus to those around us. This has another effect on us as Christians. This process of faith, manifested in trials and image bearing, results in speech. This will result in the proclamation of that life-changing message. So how about that for the longest introduction to a passage ever? Now considering all of this, considering that this is what you are expected in your life as a Christian, take heart. Do not lose heart. Don't be discouraged. Paul is using this opportunity to lift us up. He is acknowledging that life is hard. Life as a Christian will be particularly hard. Don't be surprised by that. Persecutions and trials will wear you out. But in that process, something inside you is being renewed. This occurrence is not random. God is not tormenting you for his pleasure. He is completing the work in you he promised to do. And this is the way that he does it. Verse 16 says that even though we are outwardly wasting away, inwardly we are being renewed day by day. What does this mean? We are all faced with certain realities like we talked about before. One undeniable reality is that one day we will all die. Paul faced death many times. I read one synopsis that said Paul knows this path, this work of carrying the gospel, is killing him physically. He endured extreme physical torment numerous times as a result of the gospel. His body appeared broken and haggard. He was very obviously wasting away on the outside. Yet, he refused to quit because inwardly he was being made new every day. And one day, very soon, he knew that process would be complete. Now we have to know that Paul isn't special, right? When you compare him to other Christians, he didn't contain something that we don't contain. He wasn't a superhuman or superpower, superhero. That's the right word. Yeah, exactly. That's something that we all have as Christians. The flame of resurrected life was burning inside him. His body continued to fail, or as his body continued to fail, the reality of his soul became more and more apparent. So, how does Paul seem to tap into this superpower? How does he seem to find the motivation to carry on amidst these circumstances? We already know he isn't relying on his own strength or abilities. He gives credit to God for that. He is able to carry on because he adjusts and focuses his perspective. What he is seeing and experiencing now is difficult. But when you compare it to what he knows he will receive, it is nothing. So what does he receive? What is Paul focusing on that makes what he is enduring seem trivial? It's obvious, isn't it? Paul is focusing on heaven. He is overlaying the spiritual reality of the Bible onto his physical existence. Because very soon, that's all there will be. The purpose and the main function of the gospel is not to alter our actions here on this earth. What happens here is largely inconsequential. The gospel is not to make us good and moral people. The function of Jesus' death was to pay the penalty of our sin so that we can be in the presence of God. That we can bask in the richness of who He is. That we can experience the fullness of His goodness. Heaven is the goal, people. Dwelling in God's presence is the ultimate prize of existence. Now, how many of you have a hard time visualizing or conceptualizing what heaven will be like? When I was a kid, I had this view of heaven that I think is pretty standard. So kids, listen up. If you think heaven is like a never-ending church service that you can't wait to end, you're wrong. That's what I thought it was like. Boring. Heaven is not boring. The truth is, I don't have much concrete evidence to know what heaven is like, but based on what I know about God, I can draw a couple conclusions. So the Bible says in James 1:17 that every good and perfect gift comes from God. These good gifts that come down from the Father who made all the lights in the sky, but God never changes like the shadows from those lights. He is always the same. It was funny, in one of the songs I was noticing and recognizing that. Again, it's one of those things where when you see something, you're made more aware of it. But talking about why is God being the same such a good thing? Well, if God is all that is good, if He was not always that, would it be still good? No, right? Because if He could just change who He was in a second and be like, oh, but the fact that God is steadfast in His character is so easing to our souls. So, God is the source of all things that are good and perfect. Right? So I want you guys to think of anything that you would consider to be good in your mind. Think about something. Think, oh man, that was good. That's good. I'll give you a couple examples. We say stuff like, oh man, that tastes so good. Right? When you eat something that's delicious. Or, oh hey honey, you look really good in that dress. I hung out with my friends last night and it was so good. The root of all those good things is God. That goodness flows from Him. Like a light bulb is the source of light in the room, God is the source of goodness everywhere. So what do I imagine being in the presence of God is like in relation to these good things? In God's unveiled presence is the fullness of all good things beyond what we can even comprehend, to the highest measure possible. Love, care, kindness, affection, pleasure, joy, beauty, excitement, laughter, rest, work, fun, balance, taste, smells, sights, music, warmth, games, peace, relationship, family, security, belonging. Anything that has an ounce of goodness will be experienced in its designed fullness. And to top it all off, there won't be anything to hinder it. It won't be tainted by sin or decay. Just like darkness cannot exist in the presence of light, neither can any imperfection exist in the presence of God. There is no bad thing. There is no pain, crying, deceit, cruelty, injustice, abuse, neglect, depression, death, loss, ugliness, regret, fear, enemies, darkness, pride, or ridicule. This is what Paul is focusing his gaze on. That at the end of his life, he would get to experience and enjoy all of who God is. And when we have a clear view of that, it made what he was experiencing seem light and momentary. Paul also understood that he was an heir to this great inheritance. In Paul's writings in Romans 8:15-17, he says, "For you did not receive a spirit that makes you slave again to fear, but you received a spirit of sonship. And by him we cry, Abba, Father." The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. Now, if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory. This is the path of a Christian. We share in his sufferings in order that we may also share in his glory. I don't think I'd ever thought about what being an heir meant until I was studying this passage. In my Bible notes, it says that an heir is one who has already entered, at least partially, into the possession of their inheritance. Everything belongs to Christ. And by grace, we share in what is his. Some of that inheritance we already have access to. At the moment of salvation, we were given the first installment of our inheritance, the Holy Spirit, which it says in chapter 5 is a guarantee of what is to come. Paul saw and experienced this, and he urges us to focus on that. Now, don't you think that Paul ever struggled to do this? I am sure he did. The difficulty of keeping your focus on the prize of heaven is difficult. It's something that you can't physically see. In the physical reality we live in, heaven is not visible. Either it's too far away for our eyes to see, or it is outside of our human capability to witness. And because of that, we are distracted by what we do see. Life seems to be brimming with things to avert your gaze. This is also intentional. Earlier in the chapter it says that the God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers so they cannot see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. The devil is working against God, and he is given rule over this world. And because he hates God, he is desperately seeking out to destroy everything God created, mainly people. Because of this, what is seen, the earthly stuff that holds no weight in eternity, is thrust ever before us like an annoying YouTube ad before the real video starts. What we see now is only temporary. It won't last. Don't be distracted by it. And trust me, I know we have to live in this world and we still have to navigate and operate the mundane functions of life. This week, Tierney and I were just inundated with nothing but that exact thing. I know you guys know we are selling our house and buying a new one. And so this whole week has just been a flood of mundane things you have to deal with. Busy, nonstop. And that was a direct attack. It was meant to discourage Tierney and I. It was meant to discourage me because he knew I was coming to speak here today. He didn't want me to come. And it's easy to want to give up in light of those things and say, you know what, I don't really need to preach. Terry and I joke about all the time, like, maybe you shouldn't preach anymore because it just seems like every time you do, that week before is just like, and it is, without fail. And I want to say that in light of that, it urges me always to be praying for Chuck, my other pastor, Mike, and I urge you guys to be diligently praying because what you don't see that happens behind the scenes is heavy. And he carries that weekly for this body, and we need to be battling with him in prayer. Thank you. So, don't be distracted by those things. Understand that they're a part of life, but keep them in their place. And when you figure out how to do it, tell me. Oh. We aren't meant to just give up, curl up, and die trying to get to our eternal prize faster. The process of life is designed by God, and it has, in every aspect, intention and purpose. What happens to us here will impact us for all time. But life here is a wisp in the scope of eternity. So how do we get a clearer focus on what we have to enjoy? I hope that little mental exercise was just a snidbit to help you to think about what we have to come. Anytime you guys experience even the morsel of goodness in your mind, I want you to think that was from God. That was from God. That was from God. The sunny sky outside, that's amazing. It's from God. The Bible says that the earth declares the majesty of God, right? The glory of God. We literally just have to walk outside, open our eyes, and look around and see all of the goodness which is just exploding from Him into us. How do we fix our eyes on what is unseen? What is eternal? In Hebrews 11, it says that faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. So we need to exercise and grow our faith. How do we do this? Later in chapter 12, after giving several historic examples of faith, it encourages us to fix our eyes on Jesus. And it calls Him the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before Him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of God. Consider Him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. The passage from Hebrews instructs us that the root to bolster faith, which helps you to focus on what you don't see, is to focus on the good news about Jesus. The good news about Jesus is the gospel. You should never get sick of the gospel. Hearing the gospel as a Christian should walk your mindset right to the entrance of heaven because it's where it leads all men. It's the end point of the gospel. The gospel escorts you to the presence of God. Set the news of the gospel ever before your hearts, Christian. Daily, hourly, moment by moment. How do we keep the gospel in the forefront of our mind's eye? Where is that good news found? There's only one credible source I can think of. And it's right here. I know the last time I preached, we talked about being in the Word. It's so important. You'll never stop hearing that if you're coming to a church that's preaching out of the book, out of the gospel, and it's doing service to it. You need to be here. We need to be immersed in the Word of God. The Word of God is what we as Christians use to formulate and build our perspective of God. So remember we were talking about that? All that stuff is what creates our world around us, our perspective of our mind. Be transformed in your mind by this book to see the truth and the reality of the world we live in. We need to expand our experiences of God through encountering Him in His Word, just like the car example. If you aren't aware of the character of God, you won't be able to see it in the world. You won't be aware of it. Just like the Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme. If you didn't know it existed, you would never see it. I guarantee you would never see it. You would never recognize it. God is the same way. You need to read the Bible, see who He is here, and then when you walk through life, you will say, there He is. I see Him here and there and here. And you will see a more true reality of what actually is. The more you experience of God, the more you see Him now. If you seek Him, you will find that He is everywhere. The Bible is how we access our interaction with Him. If you're not a Christian and you're hearing the Word of God, that exposes you to the gift of faith. It's how we all originally access faith. Faith comes through hearing, and hearing through the Word about Jesus Christ. That faith is grown through continuous and repetitive experiences with God through His Word in this life. Each encounter with God allows us to see more of the fullness of who He is. And that makes focusing on what we expect to inherit easier and easier to see, even though we have yet to see it fully. Paul's intention with this passage is to encourage us. He wants to relate to your experience that life is hard. The struggle is real. This is the normal aspect of being a vessel of the gospel. Your body will fall apart and fail. Your mind will be weary. With each and every passing moment, you may be longing for this life to end. Take heart, Christian, for this life is passing away. It is only temporary. And very soon we are guaranteed to receive our full inheritance, which is something immensely spectacular. Now we see as though we are looking through a dim reflection, but soon, very soon, we will see face to face. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you so much for your word, Lord. Thank you for the opportunity to just bring it before the people here today. I just hope that you would give us a clear view of who you are, God. Through experiencing these trials, we would be revealed your character to us. We would see your steadfastness. We would learn to rest in you and just glory in you, Lord, and be excited about what we have to come. Help us to focus our eyes on what we have to come, Lord, because it is glorious and grand. There are no words that can really sum it up. Thank you for your Son, Jesus, that gives us access to this great gift. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.